Welcome back, everybody, to the 10 a.m. session for our MedTech Day at Techstars Dayton Startup Week 2020. So our 10 a.m. session is finding the pivots, customer discovery versus market research. So in this session, our panelists will explore critical differences between customer discovery and market research and how insights gained from both activities can lead to pivots. So our moderator is Josh Gratch, Vice President of Operations and Data at Ascend Innovations. And our panelists are Dan Sands, CEO of MedTech consulting firm is it D11 or D11?
D11.
D11. Apologies, I should have checked that before we went live. Joe Thomas, founder and CEO of Recovery Amped, and Nicole and Bernard Dalachow, co-founders of Thea. So just a quick reminder to get your questions submitted to the panelists in your app. Click on Session Q&A, click on MedTech Day, and drop those in there, and we'll be feeding those into our panel today. So Josh, with no further ado, over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Josh Gratch, and I'll be facilitating. I'm the Vice President of Operations and Data at Ascend Innovations, a life science product company here in Dayton. This topic is very interesting and timely, including for myself, for the current environment we're operating in. So very grateful for the opportunity to moderate and learn with you all. We have a really great panel for you today with a unique set of backgrounds, and I think you'll definitely come out of this conversation with some interesting insights with respect to customer discovery and market research and how that's driven key business decisions, including pivots. So today I'm joined by our panelists, Dan Sands, Joe Thomas, and Nicole and Bernard Dalachow. And before we get started, I'd like to give each of them the opportunity to introduce themselves and provide some of their background and business experience. So Dan, let's go ahead and get started with you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Sands. I'm the CEO of D11. We're a MedTech consulting firm providing executive and board leadership for early stage and growth stage companies in the medical space. With my background, typically has been in all the medical industry with a lot in startups, 7 or so I think I'm counting at this point, and several corporate expansions. When I worked for bigger companies, raised a lot of capital, commercialized over 20 medical devices, software technology, implants, instrumentation, etc. I also spend my spare time as advisor for the Ball State Entrepreneurship Program as a board advisor, and I also teach a class on effective decision making. So I live in Indianapolis, and recently I've been helping John Owen launched the MedTech Launch Fund and providing leadership services for those companies that are awarded those grants. So glad to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Dan. Joe?
I'm Joe Thomas, founder and CEO of Recovery Amped. My background is in marketing, and I worked for one of the first text message marketing campaigns, holding campaigns with Fortune 500 companies and record labels. Moved into the space to help people deal with substance abuse and mental health through different technologies. And I'm really appreciative to be on this meeting today.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Nicole and Bernard?
Yeah, hey everyone, Nicole Dalachow. While I work at Aileron and in that role as Director of R&D, very passionate about this topic, obviously representing today co-founding Thea, which is the only all-in-one contact case and liquid solution. So if you wear contact lenses, you know that you need the case and the solution, and our product combines those for convenience and peace of mind. So we've definitely leveraged market research, customer discovery throughout our, it's been years now, journey. So excited to chat with you all today.
My name is Bernard Dalachow. I'm the owner and CEO of Lavender Home Care Solutions. This is actually now my third business, going from stone to senior care and now into medical devices. So we're looking forward to having this conversation.
Great. Well, I appreciate you all joining us today. And let's go ahead and dive in and start with the basics. So Dan, I want to go to you for this first one. For anyone new to building a business or with the desire to become an entrepreneur, define market research and how you've used it in your business experiences. And then what types of resources have you used and how have you narrowed down to what best fits your need?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad question, but I'll do my best to kind of filtering through that. So, when I look at a new business or in any opportunity, one of the first things I do is just do some secondary research and just get online and do as much as a deep dive as I can in determining what the competitive landscape is, how big the addressable market is, what other market research is available, that any clinical studies, for example, any just documented evidence that, hey, one, there's a problem. I mean, initially it's like, what is the problem? What are you trying to solve? Is your solution unique? Is it compelling? Are people going to want to buy it? And really trying to assess what are all the headwinds in the market. What are the barriers to market entry? And that can come in many forms. And once you get through that layer of one, I think convincing yourself, because you can at times, and I've started my own company in 2006 from scratch. And so I had, 14 years prior experience in an industry where I was in knee deep and seeing what the problem was. How come, it was a $6.5 billion problem with excess inventory in the medical space. So I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do that. So I, outside of, the methods of doing your just independent research on your own, just with available resources, then it gets into that follow on. Once you get by, it's like, okay, pass the litmus test. There's an opportunity here. Then dive into the primary research, and that is, you got to basically, I leverage my network, one, but two, it's that direct interaction with customers, or who's going to be buying the product, and have them tell you, is this compelling? Would they buy it? How much would they pay for it? Why are they unhappy with what's currently available, et cetera? So I don't know that there's any secret formula, Josh, other than don't get too hung up on yourself and your idea, because that really doesn't matter. What matters is the person that's going to buy your product, and how much they're willing to pay for it, and is it sustainable? You really have to look at, in the grand scheme of things, especially depending on what type of business you want this to become. Is it, hey, I want a lifestyle business, and hey, if this sustains my family and I can make a good income from it? Or are you looking to scale this up in a bigger way, and potentially raise capital, bring on investors? There's some milestones that you have to hit from an addressable market size, just from, hey, is this compelling enough that others are going to want to come alongside me and support this? And then two, just outside of that, there's, different categories of areas that I look at, in the research. It's simple as, okay, what's the problem is one area. The second area, generally, it's the technical aspects. What are the unique aspects? Is it patentable? Are you going to run into IP issues? Are you infringing on somebody else? And then you have the market itself. So there's multiple layers that you have to dig into in terms of, secondary and primary research into all these avenues. And tell me if I'm going too long here, Josh, but, just a quick story. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's perfect. I'd like to actually hear the story before I ask the next question.
Yeah. So I got, when the company I started, it was around the supply chain inventory problem and visibility in the healthcare space. And, I got into it. I confirmed all these different aspects. Yes, I talked to customers, huge problem. Talked to different people in healthcare settings, peers, customers. That what ultimately became a major headwind and adoption issue was actually the sales force in the healthcare, in the medical device industry. They felt threatened by the technology was going to eliminate or reduce their importance in the whole supply chain process of delivering products to the OR. So there was a major headwind that with any amount of research, that was just one that you just get blindsided by, and ultimately led to having to redirect and start refocusing in a different sales channel because it just wasn't going to get adopted. It was just too much headwind in the market to adopt and change a really integrated sales delivery process that technology just wasn't going to upend. So unfortunately, that led to what we'll talk about later is a pretty significant pivot in that business. So you just never know.
Perfect. So you obviously alluded to, market research driving then customer discovery. So that's a perfect segue for my next question to Joe. So to build on that, what does customer discovery entail? How is it differentiated from market research, Joe, and how have you used it to drive your business strategy?
Okay, so customer discovery, the goal of customer discovery is figuring out who your customers are and whether your idea will appeal to them. Market research is just doing the research for the overall market. So here's actually a step process that I use for customer discovery. I start with building relationships with the individuals, and I try to do that early on. So as I get a concept with doing the market research, I start building relationships with people in that industry, because it makes it a lot easier to have those follow-up conversations and them to tell you the truth about your product. Then I usually set up a pre-conversation research. So if I'm going to meet with them later on, I'm going to put together the agenda for the conversation, make sure that everything's ready to go, and sometimes I'll even do a mock conversation. And depending on the time, sometimes I may leave out the building the relationship part and jump right into the pre-conversation research. After that, then we sit down, we have a conversation. I make sure that everything's aligned, that I'm controlling the conversation. I find out their processes, what's their main objectives, what problem, discuss the problem that we're solving, and make sure how well it works with that industry, and also start discovering what's the price point that they'd be willing to pay for the product. And the next is the wrap up. And this is, I've noticed this from a lot of individuals have kind of missed the wrap up. It's the next steps. You always want to make sure you have those next steps with that conversation. So I'm going to get into the do's and don'ts, Josh, as we discussed. So, and I'll give you some examples of kind of the things that we've done. So one of the big don'ts is don't focus completely on market research and business leaders within that area. So make sure you're doing the customer discovery with it. So with Recovery Amped, we got with different business leaders. We did really extensive market research, and we found out the beachhead and what the problem was and how much money it was saving. But we did not have the real conversations with the customers. And once we actually had the conversations with the customers, we'd already built out the product, and basically we found out that we would have to prove out the product for a year or so, which would cost several $1 million. This is something we didn't predict when we put this together. And personally, that wasn't a journey we were really looking to go down at that time. So we kind of had to move our model a little bit. So here's the do's: doing ample market research and mixing that with your customer discovery. So we started looking for other opportunities in that space to address the same issue. What we found was the jail market and the prison market was a really good market because as we did our market research, we found out that they were paying an extra $35,000 per inmate that had a mental health problem. So that's a good one to address. So then I started researching and finding what other solutions were out there that were helping solve that problem. So we found that telehealth was coming in and reducing their overall spend for medical expenses within that market. So after we did that, the next thing was we had to kind of find who would actually pay for it. So with that, we started setting up meetings with senators and congressmen because what we had to do is get within their budget. And every situation that we've went through, we've kind of found that it's very different on, going to a company, you're getting in a company budget. When you're working on a state or federal level, you're trying to get into that state's, like if you're working on a state level, you have to get in that state's budget. So to get in that state's budget, there's a lot of processes. There's a lot of people you have to have backing you. It's a little easier as you're a bigger company because you have the lobbyists doing the things that now you have to do. So as we did that, we started working through that side, and through the senators, we found out who was the main player in the telehealth industry working with the jail system there. And then we started doing discovery with them. So as we went through that part of it, we developed a partnership with the main company that was doing the telehealth, because what we developed was a tool that could help with telehealth and not compete against telehealth. So we created an assessment that they could do virtually, where people could go on a track and do the assessment and cognitive behavioral therapy. As that happened, COVID kind of hit and kind of switched things up quite a bit, just like it probably has for all of us. But what we learned through this experience is, number one, that key partnerships are solid for helping you better develop your business model. Because we found for the early sales, instead of just going to these big companies, going to people that sell to these companies or people that are working within that industry and doing partnerships and doing customer discovery with them as well, was the factor that's kind of led us to where we are today. And we actually started a motto within our company. It's ABCDF, and it's always be customer discovery focused with our company, because we missed that at the beginning, and it almost destroyed our business.
No, those are great insights, Joe. And I want to tie all this together with Nicole and Bernard, because it's interesting listening to you and Dan speak. You can't really talk about market research without bleeding into customer discovery, because they're so related. So Nicole and Bernard, I'd like to go to you both to kind of define, how do market research and customer discovery relate to one another, and how does one drive the other?
Yeah, I feel like Dan and Joe teed us up well, like you said, Josh, for this question. Dan describing the difference, and Joe, like you literally used the word mixing the two together. So I think one of the things we've adopted, and Joe, I love your acronym. I might steal that too. But is adopted that it's not a linear process. It's certainly, like, I almost view it like as a circle, very dynamic. And like, as I think about it, before we were married, when we were dating, it started, in our experience, probably started with a sample size of 1 being me, customer research. Yep. So I asked him one day, like, what's
my best idea? Yeah,
what's your best idea? Because he's certainly the entrepreneur, and he literally like ran upstairs, pulled out the sketches he made 20 some years ago, and I'm, I do love him, but at the time, even I'm still, I'll give him the honest truth.
She was skeptical.
Skeptical in the sense that if I play it forward, of course, my brain goes like, all right, if we're going to spend time and money, we got to make sure. That's probably where we pivoted to sample size of 1. How do we get a larger sample size? Yeah. So that market research, and we literally hired a third-party company, Thrive Analytics, to help us survey over 1,000 end users, and gained a lot of insights that both Joe and Dan touched upon to do that. And then from there, that gave us enough confidence that there is a market size potential. And we actually, of course, I think both of you brought it up, we figured out through that research that what customers were willing to pay for it. In fact, we even got some more data on packaging, some product features. But anyway, the biggest thing was, right now, your contact case, oftentimes it's free. So we needed to make sure people were willing to pay for the all-in-one contact case and liquid solution. So with that confidence, we then shifted to the customer discovery, kind of shifted back, and went into focus groups and did one virtually, one in person. And of course, all this time, we can get more into it later. Our first go-to-market strategy was B2C. So the focus groups were more our end users to help get us to that final product. But yet, in parallel, we were also researching some more B2B routes, which I can go more into.
And actually, even to add to that, not only with the research did we gain insight into the contact market itself with over 1,000 people. But we were actually able to find a subset of frequent travelers, which was, we were getting 75% acceptance with the whole market, but we were getting in the 90s when we found the frequent traveler market. And that right there is where we could really hang our hat on and say, okay, we have a foot in, we've got a subset of people that are going to purchase this. They have a high probability to purchase this, but then they're also going to buy more and they're going to pay more for it. And we were able to get all this data just off that first one, which then actually that ended up shaping our focus groups in the future to find not only contact users that are monthly and daily, not monthly and every other week, but also finding daily contact users to start asking them questions. And all of that information allowed us to really drive how we're going back and how we're using that information between the customer and the market research to kind of bounce it one off of the other. It's like a little ping pong game back and forth, and it really worked in our favor, to where we were able to find out that we have a $1.8 billion addressable market. So that was a very positive thing for us, and a little scary at the beginning, because I'll be very honest with you, as an entrepreneur, I want my idea to work, and that first that first kind of national survey that we did, I was nervous, because it could have come back where it was like 30% of the people would have bought it, and to be very honest, at that point, we would have had to have just cut our losses and moved on. And it was exciting, and it was exhilarating, but it was scary at the same point. But it's to put your kind of faith into a system like that really gives you the foundation to kind of keep going. And I've always said, we're going to keep going until somebody tells us to stop. And knock on wood, no one's told us to stop yet.
I'll never forget, though, when we were waiting for the results, I could feel it from Bernard and our engineer.
I was nervous. We were both nervous.
And I'm like, wouldn't you rather know now? Let's know now.
But you have to know that in order to take that next step. Otherwise, you can go say, yes, there's a market, and of course there's contact lens users, but are they actually going to want to buy your product? As Dan said, do people want it? And if they do, why do they want it? And then how can we market to them? And then how can we get personas to kind of really round it all out?
Hey, Bernard, can I interject a question?
Yeah, Dan.
What drove the 30% number? Did you have that? Was that a market size related number, or gut instinct number?
No, I mean, the 30% to drop it, actually, I honestly just coming up with that now. I think when we spoke to Thrive Analytics and the gentleman that runs it, he said, look, if you're in the 60s, yeah, you could do it, but anything below the 60s, your market size is just shrinking significantly, and the actual the foundation that you can kind of grow off of doesn't really hold a lot of water at that point.
Which, just to be clear, still doesn't mean no. It just means you may have not surveyed the market that you want to go to market with.
And we went into the discovery side of things to really round out our personas, and then did the national survey, and then went back to the discovery of our personas. And we found that we did it right the first time, which was good. And we used Strategizer to actually do our personas, which is an amazing book if anybody gets it. And with that, we got lucky the first time, but maybe we would have done the national survey, and maybe it came back at 40, 50, 30%. And then it would say, okay, well, we should tweak this, we can tweak that, because that's like getting a review about your company on a Google review. It's information, and it's data coming from other people and using other people's information to drive your business.
So I want to go ahead and dive into your pivot from B2C to B2B. I know we have a follow-up question about that, but since you guys are already on a stream of conscious on this, talk a little bit about that pivot. What drove that decision?
So, I mean, honestly, I think the market size for us is huge. And B2B, we look at it as doing as licensing and working with a larger partner that we can utilize their structure, we can utilize their knowledge, we can utilize their distribution kind of streamline that they have to kind of benefit the company and get our product out there.
Yeah, and I actually want to relate back to one of the things Dan said. So yes, there's market research, customer discovery. But Dan, you said, I forget your words now, but you alluded to the fact that there's some internal reflection and research too, like knowing what you want out of it.
Yeah.
And I want to pull that back out because
the lifestyle business.
Yeah, you mentioned lifestyle. And for us, we had to do some real internal reflection on, but this is like, we both he runs Lavender, I work full-time at Aileron. It was like, we really had to figure out how this is going to, we don't want the business to run us. We want to run it. And what does that look like? And so that actually factored in as well into our pivot.
And then also even going to a B2B or a licensing deal to be able to take the data that we've compiled with national surveys, which focus groups, and when we sit in front of a company, what we're hoping is that we sit in front of them and they've seen that we've done all the testing, we know all the colors, we know the sizes, we know really what the clients want. And when they ask us, how do you know that they wanted this? We're able to go back to a wealth of data and say, here's what we've done. And we didn't do it by ourselves. We did it with partners. We had help. We had advisors. But here's what we've provided. Here's what you get. It's our show how, know how type situation, which our lawyer told us. That's the term that he used to say, here's what we did. We just want you to take it home and take it across the finish line. But we've done all the legwork and we've done the heavy lifting. So we need that extra help from you guys.
And just to connect those dots, I think thank God we have advisors, because the pivot literally came when they asked us to look inward, and they asked us to, could we create a whole business out of this? The advice we got was, you don't create a business off of one product. So you got to start thinking more long-term. And do you really want to do that? And we've got other business ideas. Yeah. So we were like, that's where we said, all right, yes, we could go B2C and build a whole business model around it. However, we think if we strategically partner, whether that's a licensing deal or, outright sale, that we could, at the end of the day, get Thea in the hands of our end users.
Yep.
So there's one more. No, that's perfect. Okay. There is one more thread I want to pull on the customer discovery discussion. When you're looking at, you guys are having conversations now with distributors. Dan, you're often operating in the OEM space. Joe, you're talking about prisons and private healthcare. How do you navigate who you actually speak with in that organization, right? Because you have buyers, you have decision makers, you have users. How do you identify who do you connect with? Is there any process that you follow to appropriately speak to the right people? And that's kind of open-ended for anyone.
So I can add that when we use Strategizer to find out who our personas were, that directed us on who we really wanted to target. We wanted the on-the-go mom. We wanted the adventurer. We wanted the business traveler. With those three and doing that work, which took us a couple months to do that work, we really honed it down and made our jobs easier in the future by testing it back and forth. And now we know how to market to them directly and how to speak to them. And that was an important step that we took right there. And it took time and it was tedious, but we did it. But it was very much worthwhile in the end.
And I think we're going to learn more from Dan and Joe on the B2B side, because we just are on the tip of the iceberg of that.
Yeah.
So on my side, for B2B, I found a startup that worked within that space and had conversations with them about who they would connect with, because they had a kind of a similar product. So I let them kind of lead me through the process because they had experience already in that industry.
I would say, depending, like in the provider side, Josh, selling into that space, reimbursement is such a huge dynamic now. Knowing how you're going to get paid and how that money is going to flow is as important as who actually is going to make the decision to buy. And if you don't have those things lined up, you can run into some serious problems, because people want to get their money. If they use their product, they need to know they're going to get reimbursed somehow. And I think in one of previous panels that Andy led with a doctor is that, their billable hours and where they're spending their time, they're in it to make money and their time is valuable. So that's an important thing. So you could have, a problem experience at at a surgeon level is different than the operational level at a hospital versus the payer side. And all those motivations, you have to understand all those. And then at the end of the day, the customer who ultimately is paying for it, when they get all their bills, are scratching their head is, what is my insurance covering, and why am I getting these invoices months later after? It's really complicated. It's not an easy thing to understand who ultimately is going to make decisions in buying your product. So, yeah, the B2B side of it sometimes appears to be an easier route. However, they have the same complexities, right? And you think, oh man, line up a strategic, it's going to be a home run. They're going to put this on, they're going to blow it up for us. That is probably further from the truth. It takes as much effort because you're managing that distributor as your internal sales team, right? And that takes a significant amount of time and energy and resources to be able to educate, train, motivate, all those things that come into making sure you line up a sustainable sales channel. So yeah, outside of doing the research, the doing part and executing is where the rubber hits the road. And as you find out where those challenges lies, I use it, Josh, and I get annoyed by the word pivot, because pivot is an everyday thing. It just depends how big the pivot is, what magnitude. Right. And I think we're seeing the external influences of COVID related incidents where that mitigated a massive pivot, globally. And we've never seen that, before. But like I said, there's pivots on a daily basis. Who am I going to hire? Am I going to replace somebody? Am I going to, hire in a national sales manager, or am I going to, align with the distributor instead? I mean, those are small decisions that technically are determining the path that your business is going to go, and really are key decisions about how you're going to scale your business.
Yeah, and a lot of it ties back into something that Joe said is next steps. Get your foot in the door, go do it, go have those conversations. And part of that next step may be an introduction to somebody else within that organization. So, Dan, you brought up COVID-19, so that's a good segue. We got a few minutes here. I do want to relate to our current situation with the pandemic. So for any of you, open-ended, talk about any business pivots, be it minor or significant, any decisions that you've made in the current environment, and how customer discovery and or market research were key to the decision-making process within that pivot.
Okay, well, I'll start that one off. We had a big pivot through this where we're doing mental health and assessments, and now we're basically doing the assessments for COVID-19 for businesses. So we had to shift our model quite a bit. So the way we did that, weirdly enough, there wasn't an ability to do market research, because if you're looking at COVID-19, we've never seen a pandemic like this. So I went to the source of, who's given all the information. So I went to the public health departments and started meeting with directors of public health departments to figure out what would be good for the businesses, what would be the all-around solution for the businesses that you think could really help them get through this. That's when we developed the surveying system, and then we just recently partnered with a thermal imaging company. So now the process interlinks and works together, and that kind of sets us up for kind of where everything's headed right now. But ours was mainly focused on customer discovery because market research wasn't there. There wasn't the numbers around this that I could go after, which is actually a very interesting model to go down, because we started building it, but I was scared to death it wouldn't work. So it's, but we couldn't take the loss of not having any business in, so we had to do something.
And are you building now? Obviously, if you're building products to COVID-19, that's a short-term market, right? So, are you building your product in a way that it has applicability after COVID passes?
Oh, absolutely. So we actually took the platform that we were building for the jail system and prison system for it, and we just expanded the ability of it. So now it can basically collect data, any types of data. We're going to be tying in biometrics with it. And then you can kind of like create your own. It's kind of like a sales navigator now, but more extensive, where you'll be able to actually create your own surveys, any information, any data you want to pull in. You'll be able to pull them from multiple sources. We've already looked into the different billing codes, because COVID has also created a telehealth boom, and a lot of these billing codes are coming out around November for telehealth systems. So we found ways to partner with telehealth systems, ways to help businesses manage different things like security, check-ins. And so we've actually found multiple markets that it could fit within. So instead of just building a whole new software, we expanded the ability of the software we have, where it has a bunch of different market fits.
That's great.
Nice.
And we can go next. We were actually meeting with our ESP advisor, Karen, on Monday, and we were updating our strategic plan, and we literally pulled back out our market research. And so if you think it just sits on the shelf, it doesn't. We pulled it back out, and, of course, working all the parts of the strategic plan. But when we got to like our ideal strategic partner, so that ideal either buyer or person that we'd license to, we, in terms of the situation with COVID, it got us to think that maybe right now there's an opportunity where companies, especially in the optical industry, like they're doing more at home. Bernard just did his optical
my eye exam
literally through his phone. And so we're thinking, okay, more things are at home, and our product, our long-term vision of it being subscription delivered to your door. There's likely some company out there that would see this as an opportunity to disrupt it's an innovation on a product that hasn't been touched in years. Plus, it's at home, can be filled. So there's, of course, the increase in revenue for them. So we're hopeful that this situation with COVID is actually amping us up for the idea that was always there. And we actually had that foresight even when we did the market research to ask, would you be willing to subscribe to this? Like, how many would you buy? Or would you do it on a reoccurring basis? So I think there's a nice connection there. It's getting us to think more opportunistically as we look at our ideal potential strategic partner.
Great. Dan, did you have anything?
Yeah, several, but I one probably more particular is around the restraint or restriction from interacting directly with potential customers as from a sales development standpoint. That's for sales minded professionals. That's been a really big change in how they go about doing business. So, if you're used to meeting in person and developing business relationships in the medical industry is pretty typical. So not only just, accessing surgeons and talk to them about product features and new products under development, is how do you get to that level of interaction remotely? And as a consulting, I just basically a single member consultant. Initially, through this process, I started reaching out to people in my network that were also consulting. And I said, hey, how are you dealing with this? How's this whole change impacting you? And, hey, I've got work, but then I'm looking at downstream projects and how to close those. So for me personally, what started out with an outreach to seek advice and counsel from other independent consultants led to creating a group consulting firm. Which now covers basically the southeast, south, southwest, west, and upper Midwest, with different resources and talents in different markets. And by bundling the opportunities we're chasing, actually helped us to focus in and leverage all our talents as opposed to individually trying to going out and doing things, which has led for more business. So it was kind of a unique dynamic that come out of trying to, okay, how am I going to access new business opportunities if I can't go out and meet people? So it was just literally leveraging that network and creating new sales channels and leveraging other people's talents in the process.
Well, it's inspiring to hear you all talk about, the fact that you're thriving in this environment, right? And we've heard a lot of positive stories about other businesses doing the same. So I encourage you to keep that up. Just a reminder to our viewers, you do have the ability to drop in questions, so I'm keeping a lookout for those. But while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, I wanted to kind of wrap up with closing thoughts. Just any kind of what kind of advice would you give to a new founder when it comes to market research and or customer discovery? Is there anything you would go back and change or do differently in your experience to better inform a business decision that you made?
I'll go with that. I would just say start with the end in mind. As simple as that. What do you want out of it? And then start digging into it. From researching the customer and the different facets that we talked about. But really, at the end of the day, you have to know that level of commitment and dedication and perseverance that you're willing to put into any effort. Any kind of pandemic related or not, business is tough, and you need to brace yourself for doing whatever it takes to make things successful. That what does success look like for you, I think, is a very first starting point, and then you get into the weeds, because there's a lot of weeds to sift through.
And then I would add to that, and get out of your own way. Your pride is not an option in this. I mean, yeah. It'll get you there, and your driving force will get you to where you want to go to, but you have to eventually start to reach out and bring people into this kind of concept of whatever you're trying to build, and you bring people into it and professionals into it, whether it's advisors or help from Aileron or anything along those lines. Somebody like Dan as well. Getting people into that allows you to reach a goal. It may not be the goal that you thought at the beginning, because we're talking about pivoting, and the end in sight may move a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, but in the end, when you get some help, you're not alone. And number two, you're not just thinking on your own, but you're got a cumulative kind of group of people to help you.
Yeah, I'd say the other one is sometimes even when you get to customer discovery, you find your product won't make it in the market, and you've got to redevelop your product. Don't give up, keep pushing through, because it happens. There's so many stories where somebody first company or first idea failed, and their next one was their $1 billion idea or multi-million-dollar idea. So just keep pushing through. Failure happens, but it doesn't mean that's the end of the journey. A lot of times it's the start of your journey to getting to where you really need to be.
Mm-hmm. And just the only other thing I would add, because I agree with what everyone shared, is the market research and customer discovery is the how. So I'm always like, okay, keep it simple. Just think, keep asking yourself, who's your customer and why are they willing to pay for it? And if you can just keep asking yourself that over and over again, and as you have those little or significant shifts, like you will shift, and it will prompt you to do research. It will prompt you to talk to your customers or get advisors, and not give up. And if you keep asking yourself that, it'll allow you to keep moving.
And I think the last thing, which all of us I think can agree on, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. And if you think it's going to happen in 6 months and you're going to hit the $1 million, if you're lucky enough to do that, love it. But it's a lot of hard. It's hard, and get ready to get dirty.
Great advice all around. And we're reaching the end of our 45 minutes, and it doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. So I'll wrap up here. Thank you to each of you for taking the time to share your perspectives today. I mean, there's such a diverse set of valuable experience and knowledge between the four of you. And I think our viewers definitely have some insights and takeaways to consider from the conversation. So appreciate you. And hopefully, if somebody has any questions, they'd feel comfortable with reaching out to you all individually.
Please do.
Please.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Josh, for moderating. You guys are fabulous today. This will wrap up our 10 a.m. Grab a drink of water, grab a snack, come back and join us. Our 11 a.m. session is almost free money. Grant money has its own own requirements, even though the money comes along. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to fund your idea or your research or your medtech startup, come join us at 11 to check that out, and we'll see you back here shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.